Hello, Georgia.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Wonderful. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I've been so excited for this conversation. I've been looking forward to it for a while. If we could ask Georgia's teachers, perhaps, or your parents, or anyone who knew you when you were younger, how would they describe young Georgia?
Oh, you know what? No one's ever asked me that before. I would say very bright, and I often if I was to like paint a picture, it's like skipping. I would
Mm.
always skip whenever I'm happy. I still actually do that now. Um, but yeah, I've always loved to write, so I think my English teacher would have said that. But yeah, just like creative and joyful and quite playful.
That's fascinating. What sort of things did you like to write about?
Honestly, I had no idea about this until it was actually a couple of days ago when I was visiting my grandma whilst I'm here in the UK. And she was like, "Oh, you used to write poems," and I wrote one down because it was so good, and you were only about six at the time. And I was like, "Oh," so I think I just used to write poems about what I could see in the world, and yeah,
Fascinating. Do you remember what your school reports said?
it tended to be pretty like decent. Never like top of the class, but definitely not bottom either. I was quite like a mid-level. Um, she's bright and intelligent, has lots of potential, quite
Mm.
nice things. I was quite like good in school. I was very happy to like please my teachers, and I would always work hard. So I think I would that would be reflected in my reports as like a good girl, so to speak.
Gosh, do you remember what your favourite subject was?
English.
English,
I
yeah.
also love dance as well.
What was your worst subject?
Maths.
Likewise, I think
Terrible.
I think everyone said that actually. I think maths is the such a for me it's my worst enemy. I don't know about you.
Yeah, and chemistry. I
I
hate
suppose so. Yeah, there's a lot of lots of symbols, and I just have no interest in it. And it sounds like you're the same, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I was more like arty. I loved like writing, anything that
Mm.
I could be creative, art, dance, writing.
Were you
Yeah.
quite sort of were you quite sociable at school?
I was very shy when I was young, but then I really came out my shell when I was about maybe like 16.
Were there at break time at school? Were you did you keep yourself to yourself, or did you play with? Did you have friends to play with?
Yeah, I was very playful. I was always playing. Yeah, always.
It's just so interesting to me, and that's the sort of why I'm asking these questions because it's just so I can see similarities to myself and also some differences, and it's such you speak to one person and the next person is there's relatability, but also such differences. Super fascinating. And then you went to university. We actually found out we went to the same university,
Yeah.
Oxford Brookes, which is really funny. And did you graduated?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I'm in awe of because I could never get my head down to do the work in the end. What did you study?
Economics and politics.
Okay, economics. So was there like a clash or there between of the sort of dislike to maths when you were younger?
Yeah, a little bit. There was. But I found out the whole concept of economics just made so much sense to me, and it still does. I just get it. I just understand it. I don't need explaining more than once, and I can just remember it because it makes sense. It's like logic to me. So the majority of economics, I adored it. I got an A star in A level and then went off to uni to do it as well and did quite well. But it was the mathematics for economics, those modules where I would just always flop. And that would just be like the difference between me getting a first in the rest of it and like scraping by a pass in the math side, which I always knew was holding me back so much. But yeah.
Mm. Oh, good on you for taking something, I suppose, by the horns that you knew you perhaps had a weakness in and choosing to do it as your degree. It's super brave. Your dissertation, what was that on?
It was why the UK should stay in the EU from an economic perspective.
Gosh, okay, God, that sounds complicated.
And I got a first in that. That
Did you?
everyone
Wow.
agreed that it was economically better for us to stay in the EU, but politically, obviously, it
Mm.
went differently.
Yeah, that's what I mean about the differences, because I mean it's amazing to hear. Like sitting down and doing something like a dissertation to me is it would sounds like torture. But then you, on the other hand, you've excelled at it and you've done amazingly well. When was ADHD first mentioned, or when did it first come into your sort of consciousness that it might be a thing?
By that point, I'd actually left my career and had just started my own business, and it was a friend of mine who I worked with quite a lot, danced with her as well, and she was like, "Have you ever thought that you might have ADHD?" And I was like, "No, why?" And then I started looking it up, but I quickly dismissed it, and it wasn't until, yeah, about a year ago that I took it seriously.
What do you think it was that prompted her to say, "Have you thought about it"?
She got to know me very well, and she's someone who she understands people from this perspective. So she's clearly done a lot of, reading into and understanding of ADHD and all sorts of different neurodiverse people, because that, I mean, she's a coach as well, and so she's super in with that. She knows it is so, she's so very aware of it. So she must have just picked up the traits in me. She's also said to me that she thinks she is. So I think she also picked up those same traits in me because we were working together. Um, and whenever we'd chat, we'd like speak for hours on end about all these amazing ideas that we have, and we would just go do 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 and just create a whole empire within like 3 minutes. Like, it was wild.
How did it make you feel when she suggested that ADHD might be something to look into?
I didn't love it. I was actually quite like dismissive, and honestly, I think it made me feel weird, like in a way that I didn't want to be different. Yeah,
Mm.
if I'm really honest, I wasn't happy about it.
And then did you look into it?
I did.
Where did you look, and what did you find?
I scoured the internet, and I just found like studies on ADHD and like traits, but loads of stuff about kids I found. And so I couldn't really relate to it. Like loads of stuff about like hyperactive young boys. I was like, well, that's definitely not me. And I did actually find an ADHD coach, because by this point I was so focused on personal development and transforming my life. I was like, right, if I've got this, I need to get a coach for it. And I spoke to her, and I was like, you know what, I'm not ready for this, and I didn't want to do it.
What so did you have a session with the coach?
Just like a discovery call, yeah.
Mm. I mean, we know that ADHD can present very differently in women and girls. I mean, not always, but on average, it seems to present differently. Like you said, it can be more internalized due to perhaps the fact that the world is less forgiving of women acting in a certain way, which is awful, but things are changing. So my question is, how do you think ADHD shows up in you?
If I'm looking back now, back to what you were saying about when I was younger, it is like George is in fairyland, like such a daydreamer. That definitely, I can see that in my childhood. But now, how does it show up? I mean, upon reflection, having now learnt a lot more about ADHD and been to a talk that really, really helped me to shift my perspective on it, I definitely see my resilience, the fact that, I mean, this is what I think really made me do so well in my career, so early on at such a young age, was that I was so hyper focused, and I had a goal and a target, and I would just like, there was nothing would stop me. And I still can be like that now, which I actually love about myself, but it also shows up in so many ways. Like, I can get so easily distracted. But I think, again, on the hyper focusing, it allows me to really, like, when I'm with you now, I'm so with you, and my attention is all on you. And that really helps me in my career and with my work, is that I can be so with someone in a way that they're probably not used to. And it's really, people value that, like giving attention is so powerful. So that can be a real strength that I see in myself. But I also see myself, like, once I'm in this hyper focused state, again, I'm in a bubble, no one can get to me. So I will be totally oblivious to something happening right there. And if someone's trying to talk to me, like, I might as well not be there. And that can feel I can feel like I'm letting people down. Another one is like the last minute thing. I didn't even realize this. I've always been such a last minute person, and I like pull things out the bag, like last minute, that you just should not be able to do. But it works for me. And I realized, oh wait, that's something that is a part of ADHD. You are actually kind of prone to winging it and doing a good job. Because the thing is with me, and this is what I realised, is I obsessively research things so much and dive into them so much that I have all this knowledge, all this understanding, that I can wing it because I've learnt so much about it already. And that's kind of how I work. So that helps me.
It's so interesting. And the last minute thing you mentioned is so relatable, I think, to so many people. With you, sometimes it helps to sprinkle in a little bit of, not panic, but a little bit of adrenaline, or to know the deadline is just there, to really get the brain fired up. And when you're in that zone, the hyper focus is so real, and the work that we can produce is out of this world, from my experience.
Yeah.
It's a real strength, that ability to do things not necessarily right at the last minute, but leave it. I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm terrible at doing things that don't need to be done immediately. If something needs to be done in like a week's time, can you find the motivation to do it now?
It depends what it is. I've got quite a lot of, there's some things that I will just do it straight away because I know it needs to be done. But what I do find is, if I've got any type of resistance around that thing, that's when I'll leave it to the last minute.
And you
If I'm cool with it and it's all clear in my head and I'll be like, oh, I'll best get it done now, because otherwise I know I'll forget, because I know what I'm like. But if I've got a little bit of resistance, I'll be like, oh, I'll leave it, because like we said yesterday when we were chatting, like, things could change by that point. And I'm so aware of that. And it's helped me so much, like, to not be super planned in advance, because things always change. So like, it's handy to not have like spent all that time on something that might not happen or might change.
Absolutely. And like you said, we were chatting yesterday, and you were saying, which I completely agree with, is that we don't know how we're going to be feeling in a week's time. We might feel amazing now, or we might feel not so great now. So let's not make a plan now, or let's not stick to something, because we don't know how we're going to be feeling in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, when we have to go to that event that we've said we're going to go to.
Yeah.
Is that, do you see that in yourself?
Massively, yeah. And I didn't really realize how much this is associated with ADHD actually before I was chatting to you about it. But I actually found that through looking at my human design and realizing that in terms of how I'm designed as a human, everyone's so unique. But for me, my authority is in my sacral chakra, which is like the gut feeling, and that space within my body where you just like, I will feel and I will know that's right for me or that's not right for me. Like, my body will tell me. And so if I'm not in a moment where I can make that decision based on how I feel, then it's not going to work for me, because that's so important to me. Whereas other people will be designed differently and their decision making will be from a different space. But for me to know that, it really helps me to honor, like, and to communicate with people, like, I don't know how I'm going to feel, that's how I operate, it's how I work, so that people don't get annoyed with me for bailing last minute or something like that.
You said something earlier that that I found really interesting. You said when you're in that hyper-focus mode, you can be completely unaware of your surroundings, or if someone's trying to talk to you, you're just not engaged with them. You're not listening to them. You can't hear them because you're just so into what's going on in front of you.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously is an interesting one, because sure, it can be a benefit, but in certain situations that could lead to some hostility or confrontation between the person who's in your who you're perhaps not ignoring, but it could be perceived as you're ignoring them. And so I suppose my question is, in relationships, whether romantic ones or just friendships, has that ever been an issue for you?
Yeah, it has.
Have you ever been accused of ignoring your mates or your partner?
Yeah, very often.
Yeah,
Very
me too. yeah. It's a tricky one. With the context of ADHD, I mean, was it ever made aware to your friends or romantic partners that was what was going on?
So now I'm aware of this, my good friends will know, and my family know, even though they still hate it, like it still annoys them. But my friends do know, my good friends do know, and because they love and accept me for who I am, they just get it. They just understand now. And so it works really well, and it's really handy for me to understand that that's actually just part of how my brain works. But yeah, in the past, like I wasn't aware, I've only been aware very recently about ADHD and how it might affect me. So yeah, I had no idea. I didn't know. And then sometimes I'd be like, what is wrong with me? Like, why didn't I hear you? I actually didn't hear you. And then people won't believe me, like, yeah, of course you heard me. I was right there. And I'm like, I just didn't hear you. And that was really, really tough. Yeah. It's easy to be single.
Yeah. I want to just chat about relationships for a moment, because it's a topic that I find interesting, and I think from speaking to various people, it's a topic that goes hand in hand with ADHD, in a good way and in a interesting way, shall we say. Just what would an ideal first date look like for Georgia?
Oh, are you asking me out?
I mean, no, for me, because I'll give you my answer afterwards, but it's just a super interesting question, because I suppose the traditional answer is maybe to go out for dinner, but for me that's like not the best situation, because I'm much more of a physical active person. So I was just curious to get your opinion.
My ideal first date, definitely on a beach. Just hanging out at the beach, I think, or walking or hiking or something like that. Because I think when you hike or walk, you can really get to know someone. And then hiking is also quite an active thing, so I'll know the person is also quite an active person. Yeah, beach, hiking, in a very chill scenario. Yeah, definitely not dinner. Although, you know what? I love dinner too. Yeah.
But as soon as do you find that as soon as the bill is paid, you're happy to stick around, or you want to up and go at that point?
Well, we're really going there, aren't we? I quite like to go to a shisha bar after that.
Yeah. I spoke to a guest of mine in a previous episode, and they were saying that there's no specific studies, but there's a lot of observational evidence to suggest that neurodiverse people kind of suit each other, and there can be a clash sometimes if one person in a relationship is perhaps ADHD or autistic and the other one isn't. Based on your experience, do you find that your personality can clash with someone who is slightly different to how you operate?
It's harder to understand, I think, for people. I think if you've experienced it yourself and been like on the side of like you've had your own experiences of, like, for example, like we're talking about being ignored or something like that, or needing to be active or whatever it is, if you feel that yourself, it's so much easier to understand it for someone else. If you don't feel that way yourself, or if you've never had a situation where someone's talking at you and you haven't actually heard what they've said, then it's so much harder to actually understand. So there's definitely that. But I've also noticed it on the flip side. So, for example, if I'm talking to someone else and I know they're not paying attention to what I'm saying, like, because this is the thing, I do think it does attract like-minded people. Like, when I first heard about ADHD, I was listening to this woman talk, and she was saying like her husband and her child are all like ADHD, and none of them fucking knew. So it's just like, but they didn't know because they were so like each other, and so it took someone outside to be like, you haven't noticed this because you are too. So I definitely think that attracts each other. Like, a ton of my friends were all ADHD. We're like, yeah, we've all got it, and that's just something we accept. But then that does mean that I'll notice it being on the other side. So, for example, if my friend is like, not, if we're having a conversation, then my friend suddenly is on their phone, I know they're engrossed in their phone, and it's not them being rude, it's them not being able to concentrate on two things. So then I'll just stop talking, and I'll just be silent, and I'll wait. Or I'll say to them, like, shall we talk about this another time? Because I understand where they're at. And I know it's not personal. They're not trying to ignore me. I'm not important just because they're not giving me their attention. It's just that they're engrossed in something else. And that's just humans. We're messy. We're like that,
Well, no, 100%. I guess the awareness is so important. And so, like you said, you can see it in your friend when they're on their phone, and you know that they're just in the zone. So,
Yeah.
and when you've got that awareness, you can step back and leave them to it. If you didn't have the awareness, perhaps then that situation might turn into a conflict, because you just might think that they're being rude or ignoring you. Yeah, super interesting. Like, my girlfriend is very different to me. I'm very impulsive, very impulsive, really, yeah. And she's very the opposite. So we kind of balance each other out. And if I want to do something, then she'll say, no, Alex, hang on a sec, just think about this, sleep on this. And there is sometimes a clash there, but I think it can be healthy. I think one question I wanted to ask you, and you said we could go anywhere yesterday, so I'm going to go here, because I struggle with, in the past, breakups, because I now know, I suppose the medical community would call it perhaps emotional dysregulation, and I really struggle to articulate my emotions. And in the past, a breakup has been a very messy situation. I'm bad at articulating it. So my question is, do you relate to that at all? And if you do you have any advice on how you might deal with a similar situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll just share my personal experience. So for me, like, when I'm in a relationship, I'm so in it. And I guess that also could be a bit of a tendency of ADHD, is to be super in something. Like, if I'm in, I'm in, and if I'm out, I'm out. Like, it really is one or the other. And so to be so in and committed to someone, and so like involved with someone's life, and then for that to suddenly stop and to suddenly go, I mean, it's going to affect anybody, but it could maybe be heightened with the ADHD. And I've had it was actually a couple of years ago now that I did go through a breakup that was it turned my world upside down. It really did. But having said that, I was absolutely fine. And I also tend to be very, very upset immediately. And then after a little while, like maybe a couple of months or so, I'm super over it. It's a really weird thing. Maybe it's just like my time to, really process the emotions. But then once I have, the acceptance is pretty good.
I spoke to Barbara Rogoski, a speaking coach, a couple of episodes ago, and she said something very similar. She said that she can't dwell on things for too long, friendships or past romantic or breakups, for example. And I don't know if you're the same, but in the immediate aftermath, do you almost hyper focus on the emotion, and you can get in a really sad state?
Yeah, I do. But I think that's a really good thing, because it's allowing me to like really feel my emotions. And this is the thing, I think, with emotions and with there's so many people who actually really struggle to feel their emotions, and so something could be eating them up, but they don't give themselves the ability to actually just be sad and be really sad for a few days, you know. Whereas because I can do that, and I know I can, then the emotions can just move through me and they go and they're released, and I'm not suppressing anything. And that's the thing about emotions, is it's just energy in motion, you know, moving around. And it's when we repress that it gets stuck, and it can be like, it can cause dis-ease, you know, disease within our body, literally by suppressing our emotions. So I think it's actually a really strong and good thing that maybe ADHD has something to do with, and it can be quite, I think it can be quite inspiring for other people to see people really feeling into their emotions that way.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's what you said makes a lot of sense. And I can see the unhealthy knock-on effects of maybe keeping it contained.
Yeah.
Are you very open about your ADHD with your friends now and sort of future partners?
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't know how much I love the label of it, if I'm totally honest. So I tend to be more like, this is how I roll, because ADHD is part of it, but there's so many other things that are unique to me that make me me, and that, yeah, can be different to your average human. But I'm so out there with who I am that I think people kind of know that anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's so clear by judging by your. I've only seen your LinkedIn content, but like you said, there's the energy is so apparent. The energy and the personality that you bring is so apparent, and it's almost quite infectious and contagious. You sort of, it rubs off in a really nice way. Do you think you're quite impulsive?
Yes, very
Yeah.
impulsive. Yeah, yeah.
And is that something that you can look back and see as being a part of you for forever?
Forever. You know what? I don't know forever. I've only really seriously noticed it. And when I think about my experiences, I've noticed it really coming out from probably from university onwards. My tendencies, can't think too much back before that makes it apparent. And maybe that's my independence and me just being me once I go to university. And before that, maybe I was just quite conformist, like doing as I was told, you know, and then suddenly, woohoo, I just do whatever I want. But yeah, the impulsivity is a massive thing. And I think I've actually only recently realized the connection to that and dopamine, and the fact that actually I'm just looking for dopamine. And so it's interesting to assess how often I act on that impulsivity. There's nothing I love more than a spontaneous decision to do something fun.
What's an example of a spontaneous decision that a big one perhaps that you've done in the last 5 years?
I've got quite a few. So my first one that's like quite big was when I just decided I'd quit my job and go to Bali and study yoga, which was so totally like, everyone's like, what? You doing what? And then, yeah, after my breakup a couple of years ago, literally the day after, I'd already had my flight booked, but the day after I went to Ibiza, I was there for 6 weeks and decided to move there and like
Okay, that's
move my whole life.
so there. That's quite a big example of impulsivity. Probably the biggest. Moving country, relocating. That's massive.
Yeah, and I've done it again and again. And actually, I quite like that about myself because I get to experience life so much. Like even this year in January, I was like, I'm gonna go to Mexico. And I just went. Like a couple of weeks later, I was on the flight, and I'd never done anything like that before. And I just went on my own and had the absolute time of my life. And yeah, I actually think it's a great thing to be able to do that. And to channel in a healthy way, though, I'm so lucky because my like addictions and things that like give me the dopamine are all quite things that are quite healthy for you, like yoga and like just going to meditate, and that's really helped me actually to regulate myself. And I just love like activities like horse riding, skydiving, like all these like dopamine type things, but they're all quite active and healthy. Whereas I do know it could have been very different. I could have become quite addicted to other things.
Yeah, for sure. And I've spoken to some people, and I include myself in that, who have, you know, found dopamine in unhealthy ways. But I've spoken about that before. I won't go into it. But no, good on you for finding dopamine in the healthy ways. It sounds like it's a lot of fun. And so you've moved to Ibiza and you decided to move there permanently, which is, you know, a lot of people might find that quite daunting, but you just did it. And then you started a yoga retreat company. How's that going?
Amazing. I love it. Yeah, it's really what I love about it is that I get to invite people into, I think, the really enjoyable part of that part of me that loves to just do different things and experience new things and be quite spontaneous. I think it's just amazing to watch people who actually are often quite scared of doing things like that just feel the permission and be like, you know what, I could do that too, and see them just come out of their shell and just like enjoy life on a whole new level.
When you moved to Ibiza and you made that decision to up and go, was there any anxiety at all?
Yeah, there was a lot of anxiety. Yeah, of course, it was a big thing, but I just knew in my heart of hearts that's what I wanted to do. I just didn't let that stop me, you know.
No, good on you. But you've got that entrepreneurial side to you massively. Before the retreat in Ibiza, were there any other ventures that we were doing?
Yes. Yes. But more like for fun. So at university, actually, I was a cheerleader. I was part of the cheerleading team. I absolutely loved it. It was like an amazing like fitness thing for me. We had an awesome squad, but we had no money. And I was like, hang on a minute, football get given thousands of pounds. Why don't cheerleading get that? Because we really desperately needed like mats, because it was quite like gymnastics, like doing flips and stuff. We needed mats, like proper mats, because we were hurting ourselves like practicing these things, but we couldn't afford it. Like as a club, like we just didn't get any money from the university. So I was like, right, I'm going to be head of fundraising. Like it wasn't even a role. I just made it up. I was like, I'm going to be head of fundraising. I'm just going to make us some money so we can buy this mat. And so I created, I can't believe I'm actually saying this. Do I say it?
You could tell me to delete.
Do I bring that one back up to the surface? I'm not sure. But I created a calendar for the cheer team, and it was very classy, by the way.
Okay.
It was a naked calendar, but it was done in a very classy way. And I don't know how I did it. I was in my final year of uni, supposedly writing my dissertation, but actually like creating this whole concept. And yeah, we made a ton of money, and that was probably my first experience of, oh, I can just do something and make some money. And then I kind of channeled that into my career, and then it's only now that I'm bringing that back into my own business.
Gosh. Well, I promise I won't turn that into a soundbite and make that the promotional clip for the episode. Can you imagine?
Any other bit?
Everything you said, all I do is just zone in on the naked calendar for the views.
Brooks cheerleading. Yeah. No, it went really well, actually. Yeah.
It's just going. Do you ever have you ever like burnt out? And if you have, what does that look like for you?
Massively. I massively burnt out. And so when I started my career, I was fresh out of university, just moved to London, could not afford to move to London at all. Like, I had 0 pennies. I don't know who I thought I was, but I was like, I'm going to London, now I'm going to do a career. So yeah, I was living in this really horrible, crummy place. And I was so motivated to get myself out of that situation that I ended up like really burning myself out, because I was a massive high achiever as well, but I really, really burnt myself out because I just would not stop, especially because I worked in a career where it was commission based. So I knew if I worked more, I'd earn more money. So I did. And I would remember I'd be like in London, like, and it didn't stop even when I was fine financially. I did really well. I didn't stop. I carried on. I just didn't know any other way, because I was just so in the zone on like, this is how we do things. This is how we grow. Because I was growing a startup as well, essentially, as well. So there was a lot of exciting things happening in the business that I just, again, like sort of took a hold of and grew the business with them. So I remember being on the phone to my mum, she'd be like, Georgia, you're burning the candle at both ends. I'm like, what do you mean, Mum? She'd be like, you literally go, like, I would literally go from work and I'd go straight out, like with my friends for dinner or something like that. Pretty much every night I would do something. I was never just chilling in the eve. That was wild. And then in the morning I'd be up first thing. I don't know how I did it. Well, a lot of caffeine was involved, but
Are you more conscious of the work, the balance now, and do you work in a different way now?
yeah, massively different. But that has been that is still like, and has been the hardest thing for me about my personal experience, I think, with ADHD actually, is my ambition is so sky high. And because I've got that focus on it, I can be so easily like, go, 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 never stop. It's still there, despite the fact that my literal business is all about retreating, slowing down, meditating, doing all these things. So I have to remind myself every day. But what I've realized is if I focus my energy on the slowing down, then my ambition doesn't go anywhere. I've still got it. I'm naturally someone who's going to create things and going to make things happen. So I don't have to worry about the doing. That will happen. What I have to focus on is the slowing down, because that won't happen unless I focus on it.
Gosh, yeah, no, it's so interesting, and I guess that comes with the self-awareness, comes with having to go through the experience, right? With the corporate job, which you were burning the candle at both ends, and you had to go through that to realize that you had the possibility of burnout within you. And perhaps your mum was a little bit more aware and she was putting the warnings out, but obviously you, having not experienced it, would probably not take it to heart straight away until you actually were in the burnout. And then now you can, I mean, you said the contrast between having to work really hard but also having a retreat business, right? Even though it's the relaxation and self-discovery is what I imagine a lot of the business is about, but behind the scenes there's got to be a powerful force to keep something like that operational, and that's you. So thank you for being so honest. I've certainly taken a lot from this episode. There is one question that I wanted to ask. It's actually the first time I've asked a guest this, and I haven't pre-warned you about this, so the answer will be super interesting. If you could spend an afternoon with anyone, they might be alive now or at any point in history, and do anything with them for a few hours, who would it be and what would you be doing?
It would be Rumi.
So who?
Rumi, a poet. Yeah, Rumi's a poet, and I've actually got an oracle card deck that is all about Rumi's poetry. and he's like quite a mystic, but very like ancient work. But I feel like Rumi has summed up life as a human. So I would love to spend just an afternoon with Rumi. And to be honest with you, I do actually in my meditations. But yeah, that would be the person.
Fascinating. Well, I'm certainly going to look up Rumi after this
You
because
need to.
it sounds so interesting. And where can people find you, Georgia, if they want to speak to you a little bit more or follow your stuff?
You can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram as Georgia St. John Smith, and sancti.co.uk for my work.
Amazing. I'll put all of that in the show notes and it will appear on the screen as well. Gosh, thank you, Georgia. Thank you so much. Thank you for being so honest. We've covered quite a few things. I appreciate the conversations. I know that people will learn a lot from what you've said today. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.